Hello students, I am RG ma'am is with you to start the new chapter of your class 9, that is natural resources. So this is the lecture number 1 of the chapter natural resource. As you know students, what is a natural resource very well, because you have read this topic in your lower classes as well. But now it's a time to understand more briefly and more deeply about natural resources and how natural resources are playing a greater role in our environment, in our life even. Okay, we are totally related to the abiotic and the biotic components of the surroundings that are surrounding us. Okay, like water, like air, these are the abiotic components which are supporting us. But if we talk about the biotic components, then the plants and animals that are surrounding us. So all these factors are really responsible for maintaining our environment, and natural resources are those resources which we have gained from our nature. Okay, there are different kind of natural resources which we are going to discuss about in this particular lecture, and also we are going to learn about that how we are harming our natural resources, okay, due to over exploitation of the natural resources like fuels. Okay, so what we are doing, we are polluting the environment. So we are going to also discuss about the air pollution in this particular lecture, and in the upcoming lectures we will going to be discuss about water pollution. Okay, the different biochemical cycles like nitrogen cycle, oxygen cycle. Okay, so these are the different cycles like carbon cycle, water cycle. So you have read all these topics in your lower classes, but now it's a time to study more and more briefly about them and learn more new things about all the cycles. Okay students, so now students, I want to give a very short introduction about natural resources which we are going to read about in this lecture. So we are going to read about the first thing of the natural resource, that what are natural resources. Anything which we get from our nature, okay, in the form that is inexhaustible or exhaustible, so they are considered as natural resources. Maybe it be air, maybe it be sunlight, wind, water, anything which we are getting naturally. Okay, naturally, like we are getting fuels also like petroleum, okay, coal, diesel, kerosene, paraffin, wax, lubricating oil. So these are all the things which we are getting from our nature. So anything which we are getting from our nature and we are using it, okay, so we are completing the needs by using all the natural resources, so they are known as what? Natural resource. Now there will be a differentiation in the natural resources. There are two types. First is inexhaustible and exhaustible. So if we consider the exhaustible, they will get exhaust one day, means they are present only and only in limited quantity. But if we talk about inexhaustible natural resource, they are present in unlimited quantity. Okay, we can use them in unlimited quantity like sunlight, okay, water, air. Okay, so these are some examples which we are going to learn about in this particular lecture also. Now you know this thing that we are just surrounded by our atmosphere, and the atmosphere have 5 layers in total. Okay, so total 5 layers, like first layer that is troposphere, then stratosphere in which the ozone layer is present, next mesosphere, thermosphere and exosphere. So we are going to learn about all these things also. Nextly we are going to discuss about the pollution. What is pollution and types of pollution, even air pollution, water pollution. Okay, nextly we are going to learn about the global warming and greenhouse effect. What is global warming, why it is caused? You know this thing very well, that the amount of toxic gases like carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, they are released in a greater amount in the atmosphere, and when they combine with the other things, they form the secondary pollutants. Okay, so you know this thing very well, that they are just forming the greenhouse gases, and because of greenhouse gases, when there is an increment in them, what will happen? The global warming will occur. Okay, and the global warming is a very important issue to understand, because it is a very common topic in today's world, and we have to understand that what is a global warming. Okay, I will give you various assignments to do also in between, and you will do it for your analysis. Now we are going to discuss about nextly the part that is ozone layer depletion, and even we are going to learn about what is water, why it is necessary, and how we can conserve water, what are the properties of water. Okay, so we are going to learn more and more things about the natural resources in this particular lecture, students. So actually you have to focus towards the natural resources. Okay, let's see the content portion of today's lecture, students. So the content is natural resources. First we are going to learn about what are natural resources. Now nextly we are going to learn about the air or atmosphere. Okay, so we are going to see the layers of air. Okay, the layers of air means where various layers are there in our atmosphere, like troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, exosphere, thermosphere. Okay, they have some distance between them, and they even have ozone as a layer in between the mesosphere and the stratosphere, which is protecting us from the harmful ultraviolet radiations which are coming from the sun. Okay, so actually we have to make you understood that how these layers are present and where they are present and what is the distance between each and every layer. So we are going to discuss through the small video even, and even we are going to see all the slides related to this topic. Now next we are going to talk about the zones of the atmosphere. There are different zones of the atmosphere where different kind of activities takes place. Okay, so let's start with the first topic, that is all about the natural resources, students. So it indicates the potential wealth of a country. How many natural resources are present inside the country indicates that the wealth of the country it is. How? Because if total amount of fossil fuels like coal, petroleum which are present around us are pure and we are using us, then we are just representing the wealth of our country. Next, the variety of substances that man gets from earth and nature to meet his basic needs is called as what? Natural resources. Natural resources are totally obtained from the earth crust, and we are getting it in a natural way, and we are using it to fulfill our needs. Why? Because we are using the vehicles, so we are putting fuel in it, so fuel we get from the nature. Okay, so certain things which are present inside nature are useful for us only. Okay, now next, the word resource means a source of supplying a material generally held in the reserve. Okay, so actually it is a source of supplying a material. Okay, so how the source is supplying the material, we will study about this thing as well. Okay, so now students, next see the next line. Natural resources are living and non-living, so they may be what? Biotic. Okay, including all the biotic factors like the living organisms, plants, animals, microorganisms. And if we talk about non-living sources, then they are known as what? Abiotic. So abiotic includes what? Air, water, sunlight. So natural resources are living also and they are non-living also. Now some of these resources are found in abundance. Now we can say that water is available on our earth in a wide variety. We can say that sunlight is available to us and it is inexhaustible resource. So they are present in abundance, but we do not say this point for fuels. Why, students? Because fuels are not much in quantity. If we overexploit it, then one day they will get vanished away. So we have to think of our future generation and we have to save the fuels for future purpose. Okay, while others are found in limited quantities and that to some restricted parts of our land. So we can say this thing that oil refineries are not all over India. Okay, some parts of India have oil refineries. Like if we talk about Gujarat region, then in Gujarat region oil refineries are usually there. Why? Because ports are there and even oceans, beaches are there, and because of that the oil refineries are there. But if we talk about Rajasthan, okay, if we talk about Uttar Pradesh, then no oil refineries there. Why? Because no beaches are there, no oceans are there, so how the fuels will be formed? Okay, so actually fuels are totally limited. The coal is limited. Okay, petroleum is limited, and through petroleum we get to know about different kind of products like petrol, diesel, kerosene, paraffin wax, lubricating oil, residual oil. Okay, so actually all these resources are even restricted to the parts of our land. Now for this reason the natural resource have to be wisely used. Okay, so it has to be widely used, it should be taken into consideration, and government also should put some proper rules to the people so that they do not over exploit these resources. However, in reality it is not so. They are being used indiscriminately. So this is important. We are just using it indiscriminately. We are using it in a very hazardous manner. Okay, how? we are just over exploiting it. How we are using it according to our needs. Okay, we are not thinking about this thing that we will be needing this fuel in the next upcoming generation also. So we should use these resources in a proper way. Okay, we should not over exploit them. Okay students, now we are going to learn about the types of natural resources. What are the types of natural resources? So let us see. The natural resources are categorized into two types. Okay, there are actually two types of natural resources. So first is inexhaustible natural resource. Those resources which cannot get exhausted even after overuse also. They are counted under inexhaustible natural resource, like sunlight, like air, like soil. So they will not get exhaust even after their overuse also. But next one is exhaustible natural resources. Exhaustible natural resources can get vanish away from our environment someday. But actually it is again of two types, the renewable ones and the non-renewable ones. We are going to talk about in the next slide. So we can see here, this is a flow chart of the natural resource. So firstly we are going to talk about the inexhaustible natural resource. So if you see here, the inexhaustible natural resources are present in unlimited quantity. So they are present in unlimited quantity, means they do not have a limit about their quantity. Okay, so they cannot be exhausted. Obviously, for example, air, water, you can include sunlight, wind. Okay, so these are the different examples of inexhaustible natural resource. Students, you have to make them clear and you have to learn also, because in examinations questions are asked from this part. Now next, if we see here exhaustible natural resource, students, then they are present in limited quantity. Okay, if once they will get exhaust, they will take 100 to 200 millions of years to form again. Okay, so actually we have to use these resources in a very limited way. We do not over exploit these resources. Now will get exhausted after some or the other day. Examples: petroleum, coal, diesel, kerosene. So these are the resources that are included inside the fuels, and we use these resources for generating the electricity, for generating heat in a larger amount. Actually what we are doing, we are just combusting them. Okay, we put the petrol inside the tanks of our vehicles, and what we are doing, we are just running the vehicle, so we are combusting them, and because of combustion they come in the form of smoke and producing the poisonous gases, even like sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide. So we are harming the environment, even that will result in the acid rain. So what we are doing, we are just over exploiting them. Okay, so we are using a lot of amount of vehicles. We should use public transport even by using so much amount of vehicles in our home. Okay, so we should think about our society health. Okay, this is very necessary, and even for our future generation. So we have read about the two type of natural resources, students. First one is inexhaustible natural resource. It will not get exhausted. It is present in unlimited quantity. Examples are air and water, and even sunlight. Now if we talk about exhaustible natural resource, those resources which are present in limited quantity and will get exhausted one day. Examples are petroleum and coal. Okay, so there are many examples of both of the two. You can see many examples on internet also, in other books also, so you can learn from that part even. Okay, so now students, our next topic is layers of atmosphere, and we are going to learn about the layers of atmosphere now throughout this small video. So students, the Earth's atmosphere is the layer of the gases which protects the Earth from the radiations and cosmic rays coming from the outer space. So actually different harmful rays which are entering inside the Earth will be protected by these layers, and this atmosphere acts as a blanket because it keeps the average temperature of the Earth nearly constant. So the temperature is maintained by these layers of atmosphere. Now the Earth's atmosphere can be divided into 5 main layers. So let us see. So the first one is troposphere. Okay, now the second one is known as stratosphere. Now the third one is known as mesosphere. Okay, now fourth one will be coming as thermosphere, and now we are on the last layer of the atmosphere, which is known as what? Exosphere. Thermosphere. So these are in total the 5 layers of the atmosphere which are protecting us from the different kind of cosmic rays and the ultraviolet rays which are entering inside the Earth's surface. Okay, so actually tropos means to change. This layer gets its name from the weather that is constantly changing and mixing up the gases in this part of our atmosphere. So actually tropos means, students, what? Change, and this layer keeps on changing different kind of gases which are entering inside the atmosphere. This layer is the closest to Earth's surface. Remember, on average, the troposphere extends from the ground to about 12 kilometers, that is 7.5 miles high away. Okay, so we can say this thing, that is from atmosphere of the Earth, or we can say the layer of the Earth, it is only 12 kilometers above. The troposphere contains about 75% of all the air in the atmosphere and almost all the water vapor which forms the cloud and the rain. So you can say this thing, that rain comes from the troposphere layer. So you can see this thing, that our atmosphere consists of different gases like nitrogen, oxygen and other gases. So nitrogen is present in 78% amount, oxygen is only 21%, and if we talk about other gases, students, then we talk about argon, carbon dioxide, water vapor. They are just counted only in 1% of the atmosphere. Okay, so this is a ratio. We can say hot air balloons fly within the troposphere. Okay, so we can say this thing, hot air balloons, even the flights fly within the troposphere layer, and it is just above 12 kilometers from our Earth's surface. So this is the closest one to our Earth's surface. Okay, students. Now we can see the second type of layer of the atmosphere. So it is known as what, students? Stratosphere. Now strat means layer. This layer of our atmosphere has its own set of layers. So it has its own set of layers. Means sub-layers are present in the particular layer stratosphere. The boundary between the stratosphere and troposphere is called as tropopause. It is the region where airplanes fly. So actually airplanes fly in the tropopause, which is a boundary between the stratosphere and the troposphere. Now, the stratosphere layer extends from the tropopause to about 50 kilometers, that is 32 miles above the Earth's surface. Okay, so actually it is 32 miles above the Earth's surface. We can consider 50 kilometers. This layer contains a thin layer of ozone molecules which forms a protective layer and absorbs harmful ultraviolet radiations from the sun. Okay, so actually it contains ozone, and this is the main part of this layer which protects us from the harmful ultraviolet radiations which are entering inside the Earth's surface. The high altitude weather balloons flying into the stratosphere for monitoring atmospheric conditions and climatic conditions. Okay, so we can say this thing, that this is the layer which is protecting us from the harmful rays. Now we are going to study about the third layer, which is known as what? Mesosphere. So meso means what? Middle. This layer is located above the stratosphere and below the thermosphere. Okay, now we are going to study more deeply about mesosphere, students. So let us see. It is the third layer in our atmosphere which is 35 kilometers, that is 22 miles thick. The transition boundary which separates the mesosphere from the stratosphere is called as the stratopause. Okay, so it is just the transition boundary which separates the both of two, and which is known as what? Stratopause. Okay, as we call it as a thermopause. Okay, in the mesosphere, fewer air molecules to absorb incoming electromagnetic radiations from the sun. So electromagnetic radiations which are entering to the Earth's surface are absorbed by the mesosphere layer. Most meteors burn up into the atmospheric layers. Okay, a meteor is a piece of rock or matter that has been broken off in space and travels through the atmosphere. Okay, so they burn inside it. When they cross the mesosphere, friction and momentum cause the meteor to burn up and appear as a light crossing the sky. Okay, now students, we are going to talk about the fourth type of layer of the atmosphere which is known as thermosphere. So thermo means what? Heat. This layer has extremely high temperatures and located above the mesosphere and below the exosphere, which is the last layer of the atmosphere. Okay, Now, let us see briefly about thermosphere, students. So, the boundary between mesosphere and thermosphere atmospheric region is known as what? Mesopause. It is the coldest part of the Earth's atmosphere. Okay, so it is coldest part of the Earth's atmosphere, which is known as what? The mesopause. Okay, now we can see here the thermosphere extends from the mesopause to the 700 kilometers, that is 435 miles above the surface of the earth. Okay, so it is 700 kilometers above the surface of the earth, you can say this thing. Okay, and the thermosphere is the thickest layer in the atmosphere. Only the lightest gases, mostly oxygen, helium and hydrogen, are found here. So you can say here that only few gases can be found in the thermosphere, and it is the layer which is having a very hot climate. Okay, now if we talk about the aurora, the northern lights and southern lights and satellites mostly occur in this layer. Okay, so in thermosphere the satellites can be seen. What is aurora, students? Aurora is a natural light display in the sky, particularly in the high altitude regions, that is caused by collision of energetic charged particles with the atoms in the high altitude atmosphere. So did you understand what is aurora, students? Now we are going to see this thing, that if we talk about only thermosphere, then it was the fourth layer. Now we are going to see the fifth layer of the atmosphere, that is exosphere. So exo means what? Outside, and the exosphere represents the outermost layer of the earth's atmosphere. So it is the just outermost layer of the earth atmosphere. And if we talk about exosphere, students, then we are going to see it briefly. So it extends from top of the thermosphere to 10,000 kilometers, that is 6,214 miles above the earth's surface. Okay, now let us see about exosphere more briefly. So we can say this thing, in this layer atoms and molecules escape into space and higher altitude satellites orbit our planet. Okay, so we can see this thing, that atoms and molecules escape into space. If we talk about the fifth layer of the atmosphere, that is exosphere. So now we are just going to arrange all the layers together, and when the layers will increase, the temperature will also increase. Okay, so we can say that troposphere, then stratosphere, then mesosphere, thermosphere and exosphere. And we can say this thing, that the temperature is constantly increasing when we are moving from lower atmospheric layer to the higher atmospheric layer. Okay, so if we see here that the temperature range, then we can say that in degrees Celsius we can measure, and this is just the zigzag graph which you can see over here. Now if we are seeing the graph, we are going to measure the different temperatures which occur in the different layers of the atmosphere. So you can see that zigzag graph is there, and from the earth's surface the temperature is constantly increasing and increasing. So we can say this thing, students, that if we talk about the layers of the atmosphere on our earth's surface, then we can say this thing, that it is protecting us from the harmful radiations. And why this is happening? Okay, so why it happens that all the 5 layers are arranged like that, and it is protecting us from the different harmful rays which are entering inside the earth's surface. So now, students, actually what happens during the day, a portion of incoming of radiant energy from the sun passes through the atmosphere and is absorbed and warms the earth's surface. Okay, so actually what happens, the heat reflected back from the ground to the atmospheric tropospheric air by conduction and convection process. So actually what happens, the UV radiations are coming, but little of them are absorbed and some of them are reflected back. The temperature in the troposphere gradually decreases with increasing altitude until the tropopause is reached. Okay, so if we talk about troposphere, then we can see the brief detailing about troposphere here itself. Now we are going to see about the stratosphere again. So stratosphere is very dry and clouds are very rare over here. As we know, ozone is concentrated in this part of the atmosphere. This ozone absorbs short wave ultraviolet radiations from the sun and converts them into heat. Okay, so actually short wave ultraviolet radiations are absorbed by the ozone and they convert into heat, and some of them are reflected back. Now more radiations is absorbed at higher altitudes compared to the lower at stratosphere, so the temperature increases with height. So as we move on toward the higher level of the atmosphere, then we can say that the temperature is increasing as the height is increasing. Okay, so as the layers of the atmosphere are moving apart, then the temperature will increase. Now if we talk about mesosphere, the mesosphere has coldest temperature in the atmosphere. It becomes cold enough to freeze water vapor in its atmosphere into ice clouds. Okay, so actually ice clouds are formed inside this layer. The air density in mesosphere is low than in the atmosphere stratosphere below. Due to less air particles, not enough heat is absorbed, which eventually leads to the colder temperature. Okay, so actually colder temperature is just because of the mesosphere. Okay, now next, apart from that, carbon dioxide in the mesosphere also helps in making this layer cold due to its cooling effect. Actually, carbon dioxide, when it turns into solid, then it is known as what, dry ice. So it is just giving the cooling effect to this layer. CO2 molecules absorbs heat energy when they become bounce off other molecules. The CO2 releases some of that energy as photons in process, which is known as what, radiative emission. So actually these CO2 releases some of the energy, and which is known as what, radiative emission. Some of those photons travel upwards, carrying heat away from the mesosphere. Thus temperature in the mesosphere keeps dropping with increase in altitude until it reaches about minus 100 degrees Celsius. So you can imagine that how much temperature is being decreased, minus 100 degrees Celsius. Is this possible on our earth to create? Okay students, now we are going to learn about the fourth layer of the atmosphere in very brief. So the thermosphere has extremely higher temperatures. Within the thermosphere, temperatures rise continually to well beyond 1000 degrees Celsius. So you can imagine how much heat is there in thermosphere. The source of thermosphere's heat is radiation emitted by the sun. The thermosphere absorbs much of the radiation than Earth receives from the sun, leaving only a fraction to actually reach the surface. So you can imagine if total radiation reaches on the Earth's surface, then what will happen? The Earth's people will die. Okay, all the living organisms will die. Now thermosphere, we can say that ultraviolet radiation, visible light and high energy particles can be seen in the thermosphere, and since there is no atmospheric gases above the thermosphere, there is no absorption of the heat from solar radiation, and so temperature soar. Okay, so what is happening? No reflecting back is there in the thermosphere, so all the temperature is increasing and increasing, and all the rays are not reflecting, they are just absorbing in this layer. So last layer of the atmosphere is known as exosphere. The exosphere is almost a vacuum. The air is very, very thin there. When air is thin, it doesn't transfer much heat to the objects in the air, even if the air is very, very hot. Okay, so air is very thin over the exosphere. Next, the temperature in exosphere varies greatly and can range from 0 to over 1700 degree Celsius. It is colder at night and much hotter during the day. So you can imagine the temperature of the layer of the atmosphere, the last layer of the atmosphere. So 1700 degrees Celsius. You can imagine this amount of temperature is there. So now students, as we have watched the video about the layers of the atmosphere, now we are going to understand in very detail about the air or the atmosphere, that how the different layers of the atmosphere are present, what is atmosphere, and how they are protecting us from the different harmful radiations that are entering inside our surface of the earth. So let us see. So the multi-layered, transparent and protective envelope of gases surrounding the planet Earth is known as what? Atmosphere. Okay, so multi-layered, why? Because 3 to 5 layers are present around the Earth's surface that are protecting us from different cosmic rays. Okay, now in other words, atmosphere is the layer of air above the Earth's surface, and air is a mixture of several gases. Okay, so if we see here that atmosphere is the layer of air above the Earth's surface, and it is a mixture of several gases, and the maximum amount of the gas is nitrogen, which is present in 78%. If we talk about oxygen, it is only 21%, and only 1% of the other gases are present in the atmosphere. About 95% of the total air is present up to the height of 20 kilometer above the Earth's surface. Remaining 5% is up to the height of 280 kilometer. Okay. Now next, composition of air. So let's see the composition of air, students. So first we are going to see the gas which are written on the left hand side, and then we are going to see the relative percentage or the volume in which they are present inside the atmosphere. Okay, so first one is nitrogen. Nitrogen is present 78%. So we can say maximum amount of the gas which is present in our atmosphere is known as nitrogen. Now next, oxygen, which is present only 20%. Okay, or we can say 21%. Now next, argon, which is present only 0.9%, so it is counted in the other gases. Okay, next, carbon dioxide, so it is only 0.03%, and helium, neon, krypton and xenon. So you can write the name of the inert gases here. These are all inert gases, students. Helium, neon, krypton and xenon. Okay, so these are what? Inert gases. They are present only and only in trace amounts. Trace amount means in very little quantity. Okay. Now, besides these gaseous components, air also possesses water vapor, industrial gases, dust, smoke particles, microorganisms, pollen grains and fungal spores as well. So all these are also present with the different gases in the air. Okay, students, so please remember this thing, that only 78% is present of nitrogen, and 20%, 20.94, or we can say 21% of oxygen. Next, 0.9% argon, and rest other gases are present in very trace amounts. Okay, now you can see here in this pictorial representation, students, nitrogen is 78%, oxygen is 20.9%. so this is just the representation of a pie chart of composition of air. So you can see here other gases are comprising 0.17% or less than this. Okay, argon and carbon dioxide are present in very little quantities in the atmosphere. Okay, now there are different zones of atmosphere or air which we have read through a very video lecture. Okay, very short video lecture. So different layers of the atmosphere, as I told about you. So we can say this thing, that above 10 to 12 kilometers the troposphere is present, then above 10 to 30 kilometers stratosphere is present, the second layer of the atmosphere. Then third layer of the atmosphere 30 to 50 kilometer above mesosphere, then 50 to 400 kilometer above thermosphere, and above this, that is 700 kilometer above the exosphere, which is the last layer of the atmosphere. Okay, so these are the different layers which are present in our atmosphere, and they are protecting us from the different cosmic rays, ultraviolet radiations from the Earth's surface. Okay, so they are reaching directly to the Earth's surface, so they prevent the ultraviolet radiations to come directly to the Earth's surface, because the radiations are having very high temperature. Okay, and if they come directly on the Earth's surface, then what will happen? The temperature of the Earth will increase. Okay, and it will be unbearable for all the living organisms to survive on this planet. Okay, so let's see in brief about the different zones of the atmosphere or air. So first one is troposphere, and it is the closest layer of the atmosphere. So it is the basal part that extends about 8 to 16 kilometer above the Earth's surface, up to 8 kilometer on the poles. Okay, in this layer important climatic events occur like cloud formation, lightning, thundering. In this region air temperature gradually decreases with the height. Okay, so now next point, its upper limit is known as what? Tropopause. Okay, why we are calling tropopause? I have made you understood this thing, that the space between the troposphere and stratosphere is known as what? Tropopause, where the air balloons fly. Okay, now next, the next layer of the atmosphere is known as stratosphere. So it lies next to the troposphere, and it is up to 50 kilometer high. In this layer temperature rises. So we know this thing, as we move on upwards towards the different layers of the atmosphere, the temperature will increase with the height. As the height increases, the temperature will increase. Okay, now next point, there is a formation of ozone layer in this region which can absorb the harmful ultraviolet rays coming from the sun. Okay, so actually stratosphere has the ozone layer, and this ozone layer is the main layer which is reflecting back the ultraviolet radiations which are coming to the from the sun, okay, to the earth's surface. As if they will enter inside our earth's surface, then they will increase rapidly the temperature of our earth's surface, and the global warming will be caused. So to stop this thing, the ozone layer is acting as a protective shield over our earth's surface, and they are reflecting back the ultraviolet radiations. Now, information on stratosphere. This is just a short point about stratosphere. So you can see over here, the stratosphere is the second layer of the atmosphere above the troposphere, ranging from about 20 kilometer to 50 kilometer of the altitude. So just above the troposphere, the stratosphere is present, and between stratosphere and troposphere, ozone layer is present. Remember this thing. Now, the density declines in the layer from 100 gram per meter cube to gram per meter cube. Okay. The temperature remains constant at the lower layer of the stratosphere and then rises with increasing altitude. So actually, if we want to see this surface, then the temperature will remain constant, but as the height increases, then the temperature will also, what will happen to the temperature, students? It will also increase. Okay. Now next, at the top of the stratosphere, the thin air may reach temperature close to the degree Celsius 273 Kelvin. So if we talk about 0 degree Celsius or 273 Kelvin, one and the same thing. Okay, ozone layer lies in the stratosphere. You know this thing. Okay, this is the layer which is protecting us from the harmful ultraviolet radiations of the sun. Now the third layer of the atmosphere is known as mesosphere. So it lies next to the stratosphere and it is up to 80 kilometer in height. Temperature decreases in this region. Remember the sequence of the layers. First one was troposphere. Second one was stratosphere, in which the ozone layer was present. Now the third one is mesosphere, which is just up to 80 kilometer in height, and temperature decreases in this region. Now fourth one is ionosphere, or we can say it as thermosphere. So it lies up to 400 kilometer above Earth's surface. In this layer, gaseous components become ionized due to sun's energy and remain there as ions. Okay, so actually ionization of different compounds occurs in this layer, which is known as what? Ionosphere. And this layer is a layer in which only and only ions are present. Okay, so after mesosphere, this layer is present, which is known as what? Ionosphere or thermosphere. Okay, now there are different regions of this atmosphere, and these is a tabular format to study about all the different layers of the atmosphere. Now actually the fifth layer, that is exosphere, is not mentioned in this tabular format. Why? Because from exosphere, students, so many questions are not asked from the examination. Okay, only some questions are asked, or they are even not asked. So I am just paying attention towards the 4 layers of the atmosphere, and we are going to read it in a very brief manner. So first we are going to see the region, that is troposphere. Second, range of distance, so 11 kilometers from the surface of earth. Then density of the air is very highest. And if we talk about importance, then most of the atmospheric air is present here. It is medium for locomotion of flying animals, help in dispersal of the seeds and fruits, region of the cloud formation. So animals can fly in this layer. Secondly, air balloons can be present in this layer. Okay, now if we talk about the second layer, that is stratosphere, then 50 kilometers from the surface of the earth. And if we talk about density, then less than the troposphere. As the height will increase, the density will decrease. Okay, contains ozone layer that traps most of the ultraviolet radiations and cosmic rays of the sun. So it traps all the ultraviolet radiations, and it does not allow the ultraviolet radiation to penetrate inside the earth's surface. Now the third layer is known as mesosphere, 80 kilometers from the surface of the earth. Now if we talk about density of air, it is very low. And if we talk about the importance of the mesosphere, so there is not so much of importance of the mesosphere, so it has not been mentioned in the tabular format. Okay, now the fourth point about thermosphere. that is 100 kilometers upwards from the Earth's surface, extremely low density. Okay, now if we talk about importance, then reflect radio waves back to Earth. Artificial satellites are present here. Okay, so actually it reflect what? Radio waves back towards the Earth, and artificial satellites are present in this layer, which is known as what? Thermosphere. Okay, students. So now you can see here, this is a typical temperature in degree Celsius, which has been mentioned in the x-axis, and if we see the y-axis of the graph, then it is just height in the kilometers. Now it is a graph which is representing the graph between the height in kilometers and next typical temperature in degree Celsius. So you can see here, as the height increases, the temperature increases with the height. Okay, so temperature increasing with the height, you can see here. Okay, this is the lowest layer, which is known as troposphere. It is just only 12 to 13 kilometers above the Earth's surface. Then we are moving towards the second layer, that is stratosphere, which is above 50 kilometers the Earth's surface. Then the next layer, which is above 100 kilometers the Earth's surface, that is thermosphere. Okay, now next will be what? The mesosphere, and next the exosphere. Okay, so next, if we see that different layers are present on the Earth's atmosphere, then if we increase the height, then the temperature will also increase. Okay, remember this thing. Okay, now it acts as a medium for movement of insects and birds. So if we talk about air, okay, this is just the explanation of air, why we are using the word air or the atmosphere. So it is just the few points which are related to it, and they are important to understand. So first is, it acts as a medium for movement of insects and birds. Second, it protects the life on the earth from harmful ultraviolet radiations on coming on the earth's surface. Next, it is a source of oxygen, carbon dioxide, nitrogen required for various metabolic activities of living beings. Next, it helps in dispersal of spores and pollen grains. Next, it maintains temperature on the earth required for the life, and then it transmits sounds for the communication. Okay, students, so these are basic important points related to atmosphere. Next, ionosphere reflects the radio waves back to the earth for long distance communication due to presence of ions and free electrons. So actually in ionosphere layer, students, different ions are present, free electrons are present. So it reflects the radio waves back to the earth. Okay. Now, burning means combustion takes place in presence of oxygen and produces carbon dioxide. If any hydrocarbon is burned, then it will produce the carbon dioxide and water vapor. Okay, remember this thing. Specific climatic conditions and water cycle is maintained due to circulation of air. As the air is circulated, different climatic conditions like hot weather, cold weather, these kind of weathers occur in the whole year. Okay. Eukaryotic cells and many prokaryotic cells require O2 for breakdown of glucose to get energy through respiration, and they releases CO2. Now, whenever the respiration takes place, the cellular respiration takes place, the adenosine triphosphate ATPs are generated and the release of carbon dioxide, that is CO2, occurs. Okay. Now, the role of the atmosphere in climate control. So, let us see the role of the atmosphere in climate control, students. So, the climate is an average weather of an area. Temperature, light and rainfall are important factors that determine climate of an area. Atmosphere plays a crucial role in its control. So, actually we can say this thing, that climate is average weather of an area, and we can control the weather. How? Actually, the important factors that determine the climate of a particular area. There are some factors which determine only the climate of that area. So atmosphere plays a crucial role in its control. So it acts like a blanket covering the whole of the earth. Next, it keeps the temperature of the earth steady. Okay, next, it acts as a bad conductor of heat that prevents the sudden increase in the temperature during the day, as well as slows down the escape of the heat into the outer space during the night. So actually, if we talk about the different roles of the atmospheric layer, then we can say that it acts as a bad conductor of heat. Okay, and it prevents the sudden increase in temperature during the day, as well as it slows down during the escape of the heat into the outer space during the night. Okay, students. Next point, the temperature range on the surface of moon is about minus 190 degrees Celsius to 110 degrees Celsius. So you can imagine that how much lower temperature is present on the moon's surface. Okay. Now we are going to talk about wind, students. So air is a motion is called wind. Speed of wind can be determined by first heating of the air, second formation of water vapor. Atmosphere can be heated from below by radiation. Such radiations are reflected back. Next, convection currents appear in the air on being heated. Okay, students. So now we are going to next talk about rain. So these are some small points which are related to the atmosphere, and they are very really understanding. So we have to understand them by seeing different points. So the warm, moist and rising air cools and forms cloud in the sky. So you know how why rain occurs. Okay, why cloud formation occur, you know this thing very well. Okay, in smaller classes you have learned this thing. That's happened due to heating of the water bodies during daytime, which get mixed up with the atmosphere. So they produce water vapor which reaches the atmosphere. Next, the air rises, it expands and cools. Next, cool air in the atmosphere sinks towards the ground. Next, due to cooling, water vapor present in the air gets facilitated. Okay, students, so now this is a small assignment for you all, and this is the assignment number 1 which you have to complete. There is a very small homework for you all, and we will meet in the next lecture, and we will read about the different things that occur as a natural resource and what are the different pollution which are caused due to our activities, and what is greenhouse effect, global warming, we are going to talk about in the next lecture. So be tuned for the next lecture, students. Thank you.